And it was really crazy when I found him. Of course, it was shocking. I couldn't believe it. But I remember feeling the Lord say to me, his life was big, but his death is bigger. And I just wasn't sure what to do with that. 2,800 women every day in the USA become a widow. That's almost 20,000 a week. And then 76% of these women are under the age of 59. Being a widow, you don't go through identity crisis in the sense of I know who I am, in as a believer in Christ, but I didn't really know where I fit anymore. So it's identity displacement. And it's hard because it's hard to imagine a future without your spouse. And then you also feel guilty if you move forward because you feel like you're leaving them behind you. It was interesting. One day I felt like the Lord said, I'm trying to get close to you, but you're in the way. I was like, okay, yes, sir. How am I in the way? And he's like, because you won't admit you're brokenhearted. You keep acting like you have it all together. That was one of the hardest things, was to accept that laughter is not betrayal. And that was hard.
Welcome back to the show, everybody. I have a very special guest here today. Jillian Chambers is here, and this is a long time coming. I don't think there's anybody that is more aligned personally, as well as her story, to give advice on how you keep rising on the days that you don't want to. I met Jillian through a dear friend of mine, Shannon Radel. And Shannon is somebody that when she says, I'd like to introduce you to, I usually interrupt and say, okay, absolutely. I can't wait to meet him. Because she's always right. She's always very intentional. And I know that there's going to be so much magic in this person and they're going to be in my life forever. Jillian is a seasoned minister, author, speaker, and life coach with decades of leadership experience. As a co-founder of the Oasis Church in Nashville, she aligned ministry vision across HR, operations, international music, and outreach. After her husband's passing, she launched a widow's ministry, creating resources to equip and empower churches worldwide to walk with widows on their healing journey. Jillian's leadership extends to global worship, music production, publishing faith-centered books, and addressing social injustices. Currently serving as Chief of Staff for International Scripture Ministries, she advises leadership, oversees key initiatives, and expands publishing, outreach, and media efforts globally. Jillian, welcome to the show.
Thank you. It's great to be here. Give a shout out to Shannon.
Oh my gosh, isn't she the best?
She really is.
Yeah,
For
she
real.
really, such a gem, such a gem. I'm going
Absolutely.
to start things off a little bit differently on this show, and I'm going to get right to the heart of Jillian's story. You were married to the love of your life, your soulmate, at 19 years old.
Yes.
And unexpectedly, he went to be with the Lord a few years ago.
Yeah, we actually were married almost 31 years and pastored for 21. So we did a lot of life together. And he was the guy that took me everywhere. So, in our marriage, he just wanted me with him wherever we went. So I found myself in spaces and places being the only female in the room. Because in a lot of tribes, women are not necessarily ministering or platform speakers, but I was always with him. So he took me all over the world, everywhere, and really truly cultivated the gifts in me for teaching and for training and for coaching and things like that. And so he definitely was my soulmate and amazing man, amazing human. And then September 23rd of 2020, the world had shut down because of COVID. Finally, it started opening back up. And on September 23rd, I found him. He had passed away in the middle of the night, completely unexpected. And I woke up a widow and I had no idea. I had just turned 50. So everybody can figure out how old I am. Thanks for that. But that's not something that was on my vision board for 2020. It wasn't in my life script. I think a lot of times we have this unwritten life script that we think life's supposed to work out a certain way. And when it doesn't, it's just so blindsiding.
Yeah.
And I was really angry, honestly, at God, because I was like, how could you let this happen? After all we've done for you, all the people that we brought hope to, all the people that we've helped transform their thinking, transform their heart, through obviously the word of God, but how could you let this happen? And I had no idea. And it was really crazy when I found him. Of course, it was shocking. I couldn't believe it. But I remember feeling the Lord say to me, his life was big, but his death is bigger. And I just wasn't sure what to do with that. And now looking back 4 years ago, I'm just like, wow, so much has happened in the last 4 years. And it's true. You know, a lot of people see pain as punishment. And I found myself going, what did I do wrong that he had to die? Like what hell, like what's wrong? Like what did I do wrong? Like this is my penance or this is my punishment.
Mm.
And I realized over the last 4 years, it wasn't a punishment. It's still painful. It doesn't take it away. And I realized it's painful, but it is possible to find purpose in the pain. And as I became a widow, I realized there's such a deficit of resources for widows, people who've lost their spouse, as far as like just, I mean, just encouragement.
Yeah.
And there's wonderful books out there that are devotionals with scriptures, and people have done a beautiful job of trying to bring hope through that. But where I was in my state of mind, I was like, I don't want to hear a scripture. I do not want to talk to God right now.
Very mad at him
I'm
right
mad at
now.
you, okay? Like I do not want to talk to you right now. So I was looking for the practicality of, okay, I just lost my best friend, and we're supposed to become one in our heart, and now my heart's amputated, so I feel half a person. All the things he did, I don't know how to do those things. What am I supposed to do? I don't know how to fix technology. I didn't even know the passwords for like Netflix and all that. I'm like, I don't know what to do with this stuff.
Mhm.
So it became so overwhelming. I mean, Kristy, there's so many decisions that you have to make immediately that you hit decision fatigue. And
Mm.
then you think to yourself, what if I make the wrong decision?
Mm.
And I mean, I have 5 kids. Four of them were married at the time when he passed away. I have one at the time she was 15. I'm trying to be strong for them, trying to be strong for, my grandchildren, trying to be strong for our community. But I realized if any time of my life, this is probably the time I get a pass.
Mm.
I'm not going to be strong, and it was so challenging because I am a get up and go girl. And I really wanted to fast forward through the grief and fast forward through those days. I just didn't want to sit in it. And I remember I was struggling so badly one day. I was like, God, I'm so tired of crying. Like, I just don't want to cry. I'm not that person. I'm Silver Lining Sally. I wouldn't even go watch sad movies because I'm like, why? Why are we going to pay to cry? Like, what does that even mean? And so people would tell me, oh, it's great. I cried. I'm like, I'm not going to see that. Like, what? And so, I mean, I remember this was such an immersion into this foreign world of grief because my parents are still alive. I hadn't lost family members. We'd walked through, death through people in our church, but to actually have it happen to me was a completely different experience. And one day I was really whining, and I feel like the Lord reminded me about a scuba diving trip that we had taken. My husband, he was really type A and very funny. Funny, like not witty funny, but funny because he was type A. You know what I'm talking about. And we were in Hawaii for our
That's
trip.
how you got through those moments.
Yes, that's how.
You're being so cute and funny.
I'm just like, oh my God. So the 27th anniversary, our 27th anniversary, we were in Hawaii, and this is him, okay? So he says to me, I'm going to rent a GoPro camera. I want you to film me surfing. Here's me. You're in your late 50s, you're kind of in your mid 50s, right? Like that's not something you should probably do. And he's like, oh, I want you to film, I want to show the kids. And I'm thinking, we're going to win some serious cash on America's Funniest Home Videos. I'm in. So he gets me a GoPro camera, gets himself a surfboard, and he's surfing out in the middle of the ocean. I don't know what I was thinking, but I'm walking. Like I'm thinking, I don't know. Because it was shallow in the beginning, right? So I can handle it. So then all of a sudden there comes this intersection, this crucial point where guess what? Your girl can't stand on the water anymore. Can't stand on the ocean, the sand. And so all of a sudden these waves are just pelting me over and over. I got my hand in the air, even though it's a waterproof camera. I didn't want to fly off my wrist, and then lose it in the ocean. And he's paddling out there, and he keeps turning around going, are you coming? And I'm like, cuss. Like, yes, I'm coming, slow down. So I'm like, I'm exhausted, I can't do this anymore, for real. I'm just like, my arms are tired, I'm stressing out, my heart's racing, I'm anxious, and I'm like, I can't do this, these waves are just crashing over me. Finally I'm like, I gotta take a break. So the wave comes, picks me up, takes me further away from him, and then it takes me a little bit closer. And then I realize, does it again. Wave comes in, picks me up, takes me closer to the shore, and then brings me a little closer. So as I surrendered to the wave, it
Mhm.
actually took me to the place I needed to go. And one day I was just fighting grief, and I felt like the Lord said, you need to stop fighting the waves of grief. And he said, I'm going to take you to a place you've never been, but you're fighting the vehicle I'm using to get you there. You have to
Mm,
understand how to get through grief. And
mm,
that was the beginning of a journey that has brought me to this place where God has put in me this passion and this heart for people who have lost their spouse.
mhm,
So widows and widowers. I don't know if people realize this. I didn't realize this, but 2,800 women every day in the USA become a widow. 2,800 women every day. That's almost 20,000 a week. And then 76% of these women are under the age of 59. And so, the term widow was so hard for me to digest because I kept imagining the old lady, that sits in front of the Tweety Bird cage rocking and knitting. And I just couldn't relate to that.
yeah.
And so even the term widow was so hard for me. I couldn't even accept it. It's like, I don't identify as a widow. You know what I'm saying? And it was so hard. And I just had to get into myself and go, why? And I remember talking to one of my friends who had lost her spouse. And I'm like, you know why? Because every widow that we talk about in the Bible is pathetic. They get down to their last meal. That the one has to go borrow vessels because her sons are, she's in debt, and their sons are going to be sold to the debtor if she doesn't, come up with some money. And then the other one's like plunking her, half a penny in the offering, and Jesus like, oh my God, look at her, she gave everything she's got. And I'm thinking, why do we let them get down to their last?
Mhm,
Like, what's going on with the world that we don't take care of them? And me being included. And so, and as I began to post about my journey, I felt like I was supposed to like share parts of my story publicly, which I'm a private person. But as I began to share it, I started hashtagging on social media ferociously and forever. And it became like this. So it was almost like an ebook of sorts, like a memoir
mhm,
of sorts.
mhm,
What happened was people started following my journey on, ferociously and forever. And I started getting reached people would reach out to me 2 to 3, 4, 5 a week, and they had just lost their spouse, or they were a friend of someone who lost their spouse. So then I spend hours every week on the phone talking to people. I'm not even through my own journey.
mhm,
I'm not even certain I'm doing this right, to be honest with you. Do I know what I'm talking about? I've never been here before. But as I found myself saying the same thing, just bringing hope, talking about life, talking about God, talking about you still have a purpose. If you have a pulse, you have a purpose. Just because your spouse is no longer here doesn't mean your purpose has ended. And as I'm sharing this with them, I'm going, oh, that's for me too. And then I got a hold of a message that was really, it was the pastor that I serve right now, Chris Hodges. They have a church called Church of the Highlands out of Alabama. It has 25 campuses. He
wow,
oversees other churches and pays a really cool coach to pastors, just a great life-giving guy. And he was teaching about how to get through your worst day. And he was talking about loss. And he was all kinds of loss of job, loss of life, loss of spouse, loss of purpose. And he talked about how the author of Purpose Driven Life, Rick Warren, when his son passed away, my pastor Chris went to see him in California. And Rick started walking him and a couple other leaders, through this process of grief that he'd gone through. And so he's talked about the stages. And so the first stage was shock. And he said, that's where you're disoriented, and a lot of people are forced to make decisions in this state of shock that they later regret. So call a lifeline. Don't be afraid to call a lifeline. And then he said, then it's just sad. So you go from shock to just sorrow. And it's just, you just realize this weight of sadness of all the things that are no longer going to be the same.
mhm,
Hearing his voice. I mean, my husband used to chomp his food. I mean, loud. And I remember thinking what I wouldn't give to hear that. Just,
mm.
I would just, instead of like giving him my look, because I was never a nagging wife, I would just be like, that look where you're like, come on, close your mouth. And I just remember thinking I would do anything to hear that again. So
Yeah.
there's just the sadness that comes. And then there's the struggle, which is where anger, you just get so angry, and you just really struggle with, why did this happen? What's going on? I don't understand. What did I do wrong? The pain, the punishment, the this, the that. But once you get to the next phase, it all changes. And that's surrender. And surrender is where everything shifts. And I remember listening to him teach this, and I was actually visiting a friend in Austin, and I was in a hotel room, and I was watching online on my phone, and I sat on the edge of my bed in the hotel room, and I was like, this is exactly my story. I've done exactly these things. And each time I would get to surrender, I had to surrender my why. Why
Mm.
did this happen? And then I had to surrender my need to know why. So it's one thing to surrender why, but then it's like, why do I have to know?
Mhm.
It's not going to bring him back. It's not going to change today. Maybe it will bring some kind of justification. Maybe it'll bring some kind of reason. Maybe it'll bring some kind, but at the end of the day, I don't think there's any answer that's good enough.
Mhm.
I had to reason that. I had to really go into myself and go, is there really any answer that's going to be good enough? So I had to surrender my need to know why. And then I had to surrender my life script.
Mm.
I didn't write that in at 50. That was not part of the scene of my life at that stage. It was so hard, because we have scripted out, we're going to be old couple walking down the beach hand in hand. We've worked our whole life, to get to this place, and we're going to enjoy life, and we've worked hard. Now we're going to play hard, and it's just like you see couples at Costco. And I remember Valentine's Day. I couldn't believe it was the day before Valentine's Day. And I was at Costco and they had all these flowers, like in these vases and all this stuff. And I avoided that section as long as I could. And then all of a sudden I found myself in this aisle looking up, and there they all were staring at me. And I was having a moment. And I saw this little man, this old man, he walked up, he was so sweet, walked up, picked up these flowers, went to the cashier. He knew exactly what he wanted. And I admired him, for having the courage to pick out flowers for his wife. And then the exact same, if I had camera two would have been this poor guy staring at these flowers. He was so lost and he was completely disoriented and just confused. And I remember looking at him and looking at the guy and just in my own mind doing this assessment. And I honestly had this like should moment, like I shouldn't be here. I shouldn't be without my husband. He should be here. And it was so funny, Kristy, because I felt like this voice said, stop shoulding on yourself.
Mhm.
Stop shoulding on yourself and make a difference. So this little man turns and looks at me like, help me. And I thought, do you know who you're asking? Like, if you only knew who you look, all of the people in Costco right now, and you're going to look at me. And I was kind of diving into this pitiful cave of poor, pitiful me, and then all of a sudden my paradigm shifted. And I was like, no, if I can't have flowers, I'm going to make sure somebody else does. And I walked over to him and I asked him a couple questions about his wife. And the answers leaned me towards red roses. And then he finally looked at me and he goes, what's your favorite? And I said, actually, it's the red roses. And he goes, okay, good decision. And it was so funny because I remember reframing that moment because at first it was all about me. You know what
Mhm.
I'm saying? And a lot of times we get to these intersections in our life where it's all about us. And when I stopped thinking about myself and I started thinking about the person that was at home, hoping that her husband was bringing her, hoping that he would remember, hoping that he would think of her, I thought, wow, I'm going to focus on her rather than myself. And when you get through that surrender part, you do start to kind of feel this sanctification where God kind of comes in and he starts to turn your loss into a lesson. And you start seeing him giving you opportunities and you start remembering all these moments where he was with you. You felt alone and isolated, but you really never really were. And crazy moments. And then the best part is serving others. And that's the opportunity I had in that moment was to get out of myself and serve someone else. And in grief, your dopamine and your serotonin are completely depleted. And dopamine is kind of that pleasure center when an addict comes off of whatever it is they're addicted to, they have dopamine withdrawal. And what we've discovered in grief is that because your spouse is no longer there, the one that just grabs your hand and sends tingles up and down your body, or the winks at you from across the room, and you just kind of get this little even if you've been married a long time, there's those moments that still make you feel loved and affirmed, and you just get a rush of dopamine. Well, that's gone,
Mm.
and you go through dopamine withdrawal. And what I discovered from my journey was when I serve someone else, I actually get a dopamine hit because I'm helping somebody else have that moment. In other words, if I can serve you and make you feel better, somehow it makes me feel better.
Mhm.
And so it's interesting because all of those stages are so relevant to loss in our life, whether it's a loss of a spouse, loss of a job, loss of a dream, loss of a house, whatever. You go through all of those stages.
Mhm.
And as I began to dive in and digest those stages, I realized this is the conversations I'm having with widows and widowers. I'm constantly talking about these stages. So I took all of those stages. I called Pastor Chris and said, can I use this as a template? Can I create a curriculum, like a small group thing where people could build community? Because that's the other thing I noticed was being a widow, you don't go through identity crisis in the sense of I know who I am, in as a believer in Christ. But I didn't really know where I fit anymore. So
Hmm.
it's identity displacement. So I don't know where my place is because I was married, I was a pastor, I was in ministry, I was a coach. Now I'm not married, I'm no longer a pastor. Can I really coach people at this stage of my life when I'm going through what I'm going through? There's all these questions and, self-identity sabotage and all these mind monsters that are convincing you that your life is over and it's not the same and all these things. And it's interesting because as I'm having these conversations, I'm like, this could help people. It helped me. So
Hmm.
I called a producer here in town and I'm like, hey, I think I want to put together something. And so we did. We went to the studio and I did sessions. I did a session on shock, sorrow, struggle, surrender, sanctification, service. And then I added reinvention because after living this journey, walking this journey, I realized if I don't reinvent, I'm going to get stuck. And the truth is, your rear view mirror is smaller than your windshield intentionally. And a lot of us flip the script and we put our rear view mirror in front of us and our windshield behind us. And we shrink our windshield thinking that our future is smaller than our past. And no matter where we are in life, it's not smaller. It can always be bigger. It's just what do we see? What do we look at? Which one do we choose to focus on? The past or the future? And it's hard because it's hard to imagine a future without your spouse.
Hmm.
And then you also feel guilty if you move forward because you feel like you're leaving them behind you. And I was struggling. I had a real struggle with that. And one of the mentors in my life, they said, no, every step forward is not a step away, it's a step closer
Hmm.
because you're closer to eternity. You're closer to Him in eternity. And that shifted my paradigm and completely rearranged, honestly, the way I thought about it. And it kind of lit a fire under me to rise again and to rise up because I realized I have to do something with this pain. I'm not going to sit here and waste it.
Hmm.
It would be such a waste. And I'm, being silver lining Sally, I'm thinking, I want to help you. I want to help you. We're going to change the world together. And then all of a sudden I realized, oh my gosh, you know what? Not only does my success and my significance and all the things that I've accomplished help people, but so does my suffering and my pain.
Hmm.
And it's really hard to even say that out loud because it's just not the fun side of it. Nobody goes, I want to suffer. Yeah, let's go. But the same God that's with me in, the beautiful things, we call it perks and pain. It's like He's with me in the perks, He's with me in the pain.
Hmm.
And there was this whole facet of Him I never saw because I've never been through anything like this before. And it was interesting. One day I felt like the Lord said, I'm trying to get close to you, but you're in the way. I was like, okay, yes, sir. How am I in the way? And He's like, because you won't admit you're brokenhearted. You keep acting like
Hmm.
you have it all together.
How far along in the journey was that?
About 2 years.
2 years.
It's
Yeah.
a long time.
So when there's so many amazing things that you just shared. Did you have anybody to lean on? At this time, I mean, of course you have 5 children, but now you still are the leader. You have that hat on. Did you allow anybody? Did you ask for help? Did anybody come in and make decisions for you or help you make any of these decisions? Or were you leading this whole thing?
I had an amazing community. My parents are still alive. My mom and dad came in, and of
Mm,
course, sat with me, cried with me. They grieved too. They lost a son.
yeah.
I have probably my best, we call it, she's my ride or die, and
Yeah. We
we
call those 2 a.m. friends, right? Like, I need
yeah,
you. It's 2 a.m.
absolutely,
She's gonna answer the text. She's
absolutely.
coming. No
Yeah.
questions asked.
Yeah,
Yep.
I actually had three. One's a former Miss America. Another one is a girl that we traveled the globe together. She does a lot of work in Cambodia. And then my ride or dies from Oklahoma, and all three of them flew in. different times, but they were all here in my house and just started taking over. I mean, it was like one had dinner and worked out. I mean, it was just like they just let me cry. They let me grieve. And I mean, it's so hard because you like, I find him on a Wednesday. I'm at the memorial home on Thursday, picking out his plot on Friday, viewing his body on Saturday, burying him on Sunday, planning his celebration of life on Monday for 2 weeks later. So you just don't even have time to
Mm.
absorb, you know what I mean, what's happened. And that's when everybody's with you,
Yeah.
and then celebration of life is over,
They go home.
cricket, cricket.
Yeah.
But I did have friends that checked on me. Those three specifically checked on me. And then my ride or die probably every day checked on me.
Did
Uh,
you know what you needed of them though? Like I remember when I have nothing comparable to what you went through, but I went through a very unexpected divorce, and it was painful, and it, I didn't know. Similar to you, I didn't know what to ask for, and then there was a moment in time that I asked my mom to act a certain way. Like I can't. I'm grieving too. Like you need to call somebody else because I can't take these phone. Like, did you know what to ask for? Did you know what you needed at the time?
no, there was a really close friend in our church. She's a real estate agent, and we'd actually sold our house.
Mm.
And we had signed, for another house. And the people that bought our house, they actually backed out. So that threw everything and spiraled. And when I woke up a widow that day, the inspector was coming to inspect my house. But the
Oh.
inspector didn't know that the people had backed out. So the realtor was a widow.
Mm.
She was remarried at the time, but she was a widow. She came in, sat down, picked me up, took my hand, took me to the estate attorney, like literally, hey, I'm gonna take you here. Hey, I'm gonna take you here. I'm like, okay. Like I didn't know what to ask for. I didn't know what I was supposed to do. I didn't know where to go. In fact, I created a checklist. It's a widow's checklist and it's what to do in the first year. It's on my jillchambers.com website
Yeah.
because there's certain things that need to be done
Hmm.
within the first 3 months. Then there's things that don't need to be done. And you don't know what needs to be done, what doesn't need to be done. I mean, I went to my bank and they were so kind. And they said, listen, because I said everything was on his account, all of our auto drafts, everything, all the bills were coming out of his account, his card, on his card. And they said, listen, we're not going to change anything till you're ready.
Mm.
When you switch your accounts over, switch them over. And it was just me going, and because I have a relationship with this bank, that we've been here for 30 years or whatever. And so there were certain people that through relationship, pardon me, I was able to communicate, and the things I didn't even know what to ask for, some people would answer for me. And
Mm.
so she really actually swooped in and said, listen, you're going to, she's a very type A. But you know what? It helped me. And then my pastor, Chris, he was a friend of ours. We used to train for John Maxwell. We did a Million Leader Mandate, the Equip organization, and my husband, myself, and Chris trained pastors in Switzerland together for several years. And so we became really close. And he was the third phone call I made. And so after Danny died, he goes, do you need anything? And I did. I needed a purpose, to be honest with you. And he actually hired me full time or part time just to just give me something. But this is crazy. He says, look, this is the area that we have a need in. You don't have to take it if you don't want to, but you don't have to move here. You can stay at your house in Franklin. It was premarital counseling. And I was like, what a sick joke. I was like, I can do, look, Kristy,
I
you
can
you
do
read
anything, you guys. I
yeah,
can
I
do
can do media, I
anything.
can do worship, I can create, I can work with kids, I can do what? It was so funny because here's my job description. If you want premarital counseling, you email me, marriage at Church of the Highlands. I get your information. I send you several assessments. You fill them out. I take your assessment and I send it to one of our 25 campuses, whichever one you are a community in, and they take it from there. It was so easy, but I was so mad. I'm like looking at their answers on these assessments. Oh, we're just so in love. We love each other so
You're
much.
like,
And I'm just like,
whatever, whatever.
yeah. And I'm like, seriously, Lord, like for real. And it was so funny one day I'm whining and God goes, hey, You are a vow fulfiller.
Mm.
You said till death do you part, and you did. And he said, I put you in this seat intentionally. He said, every one of those files that you send, before you send them, I want you to pray that they will become vow fulfillers, that their marriage will last. And you know what happened? It was really a good little spanking, right? Like, but what happened was my paradigm shifted from being a charity case, oh, poor Jill, we got to give her a job, to I'm on assignment. And man, when you reframe some of those thoughts, it gives you this energy and this confidence. And I'm like, oh, I'm not a charity case. I mean, my back straightened up, my head went forward. I'm like, I'm a vow fulfiller. And honestly, that's when I work with widows and widowers, I tell them like, guys, we're not pitiful, we're powerful. We completed our vow. We are vow fulfillers. And it just shifts
Mm.
everything about them. It's like, whoa. I mean, I'm telling you, I've been in a room full where they go from this to they literally sit up, their whole posture shifts. Well, if the outside posture shifts, imagine what happens on the inside of them. So
Yeah.
you talk about rising up, you know what I'm
Yeah.
saying? It's like, whoa,
I
I'm
mean,
right completely.
reframing is one of the most powerful tools. Oh my gosh, so powerful. And I would imagine that they needed permission to do that.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's interesting too because being a widow, speaking about a widow's journey versus anybody else trying to, you just have trust equity. As soon as you say you're a widow, they're like, oh, tell me this, tell me that. What'd you do? What'd you how? And I'm like, I'll be honest, this is what I did and it worked. This is what I did, it didn't work. But the biggest thing was finding community because of that identity displacement. When I started finding people like myself who were struggling and we could just talk about it. And it's interesting. And my husband died in 2020. In 2022, around the holidays, I had two friends lose their spouse. And I reached out to them and I thought, you know what? This is going to be terrible. No offense, Silver Lining Sally, but the holidays are awful. And
Hmm.
so I reached out to another friend of mine. He's late 60s and really kind gentleman. His wife had passed of cancer like 8 years prior or 7 years prior. And I said, hey, I want to do something at my house. And he goes, what? I said, I don't know. I just want it to be like hope for the holidays or something. And I said, I just want to invite some of these people that have lost their spouse and just let them know they're not alone. And I said, but one of them is a man, and I don't want it to be one man and all these chicks. So would you come to it? He goes, absolutely. So we ended up, honestly, I invited a lot of people, but I ended up with three widowers, three men, and three women. And we sat around my dining table. And the most recent widow, her husband had died suddenly after working out at CrossFit. It was not expected. It was 8 weeks, and she was so angry. She was in the struggle stage. And, I watched her pound my dining time. I mean, she was just really angry. But, there was tears, but there was so much laughter. And it was cool because we kind of gave each other permission to laugh. And at the end of the night, she goes, can we please do this again? Can we do it next month? Well, the next month, I'm like, yeah, let's do it again. She brings another lady who had just lost her husband right after our meeting. So this lady's like 4 weeks in. And I opened my front door and this woman's standing on my lawn. And she's like, I can't come in. I can't come in. And I said, why can't you come in? She said, because if I come in, I'm a widow. And I said, well, I'll come out here with you for a little while. So I stood next to her and she goes, I really don't think I'm going to make it. You probably need to go inside. I said, why don't you come in as my friend instead of a widow? Just come on in. So we came in, we always do dinner first. And then I just share something. And I'll never forget the first lady that had lost her husband that was so angry and struggling. She's holding the hand of this second lady, telling her she's going to make it. She's going to get through. It's going to be all right. She's not alone. And I'm just going, 1 month ago, your girl was having a meltdown. What I'm saying? But what I realized was the power of serving someone else.
Yeah.
The power of helping someone else because it gets your eyes off you.
Yep.
And I'm telling you, that's what I've done. I've been doing it now since 2022. We've got about 35 of us in our group. We don't all meet at the same time. We've got all different ages. I've got a young man who was 36. His wife died after giving birth to their first child. He was completely lost. I've got women who've got her husband went skydiving. He went skydiving like he always did. This time it didn't work out so good. The parachute didn't open. She's got 4 kids. She's young. So it's the stereotype is what I really want to break through because people don't understand. We're all ages. Well, with that comes different stages of life that need help, different kinds of wisdom, different kinds of advice, different kinds. But, honestly, probably the greatest healing agent is community. More so than any kind of, self-help book, more so than any kind of here's your next steps book. If you cannot do it alone. You cannot do it alone.
Now, do you feel like with everything that you've done, being a pastor and everything that you and Danny did together, you were creating community though. You had community, you had, you're part of John Maxwell's group, you're a coach, etc. Do you think that everything that you went through with Danny and being a widow is transferable into life though?
Yeah, because I think when you go through loss, like I started gathering people, and just calling it beyond the loss. Just going to different, like, churches or different regions, and just telling my story, but then walking through those stages, because reinvention is such a part of who we have to become.
Yeah.
And it's not invention. Okay,
Yeah,
so you're not
no.
starting from scratch.
And I
But
think about like, oh, that job didn't work out. Okay, well,
yeah,
reinvent
well, now what
yourself.
do I do? You're in.
Reinvent yourself, right?
Yeah.
Like, oh, that person didn't accept it. Who cares, right? Whatever it is, like what I'm hearing from you, like this is phenomenal for widows. I don't think that there's anything out there like it. But I'm hearing so many life lessons that are transferable to any other place, and we all everything that you're describing, I've been there too. There's some place in my life where I felt those things. I felt alone.
I
I've
feel like it's
isolated.
relevant
Yeah.
to a lot of people. I think the challenge that I've seen is, if I don't focus on, so like, for I can talk about Beyond the Lost and people will go, "Oh." But if I don't talk to widows, they don't hear it outside of that and think, "Oh, that's relevant for me." So I have to
Mm-hmm.
talk to her and let everybody else listen. If I
Mm-hmm.
talk to everybody else, I don't know that she'll listen. And because when I became a widow, I was YouTubing, I was researching, I was looking, and there was just not a lot of resources. Like, when I say resources, there were people that had, grief books, grief share, things like that. But I found one person on YouTube who was a widow, and she just sat in this, like, closet and had a camera and started talking about her story. And then I found one person on Instagram, and then she got married real quick. So I turned her off. For some reason, she was disqualified in my heart. And then she got divorced because she got married too quickly. She didn't give herself enough time. So part of this is, a lot of people will jump into the next relationship, but you kind of got to discover who you are now.
Mm-hmm.
And if you jump into a relationship with the person you think you were when you were married, you're really going to shortchange that person that you're marrying, because there's a whole evolution that's happening through grief.
Yeah.
A part of the reinvention is kind of like, think about this: God created a caterpillar to be a butterfly.
Yeah.
It was never designed to stay on the ground, ever. And the, the process by which that caterpillar becomes a butterfly is a whole metamorphosis that happens in darkness. It happens in tension. It happens in isolation. And it's interesting because I feel like my journey reflects a lot like a caterpillar, in the sense that it's like I was forced into this place. It felt so restrictive. Grief was just felt restrictive to me. I didn't know when it was going to happen. I couldn't forecast it. I couldn't schedule it. And I just didn't want to be out in public when I had my meltdowns. So I kind of isolated. But then, there was this cocoon of safety that I put myself in. Even though my friends would reach out, even though people would reach out and check on me, I still just felt out of sorts. I just didn't feel like myself. And I didn't know who I was. And so in that dark place, though, there really was a transformation happening. I just couldn't see it. And I didn't realize that in that dark place, what was actually transforming in me could actually be more beautiful than where I was.
Mm-hmm.
We always see change as something bad or change as something negative. And then there came a point in time, about 2 years in, I felt like I didn't fit there anymore. I didn't fit in that cocoon anymore. And as from studying, in school, it's the tension that caterpillar as a butterfly has to press through in order to give the strength into the wings that it needs to fly. But what happens is we're too insecure in that tension, so we won't push through it. or we feel too safe in our restriction, or we feel too safe in our darkness, or it's almost like you start adopting the darkness as your comfort zone, and it was never meant to be a place of permanence. It's just a place of temporary, so that that metamorphosis can take place. And whatever tension it is that you're fighting through, whether it's a divorce, whether it's a loss of a bit, whatever it is, it's producing in you an inner strength to rise up. But we don't know that because we can't see what's happening on the inside of us. And you don't know what's happening until you then emerge. So after the emergence, you're like, oh, I have color, I have wings, I have, you know what I'm saying? Like, what? Well, prior to the metamorphosis, your whole mindset, the caterpillar's on the ground. Perspective is totally different. you know Means of transportation totally different. There's so many mindsets that have to shift, and it's interesting when people rise up, they don't think the same, they don't
Yeah.
see the same. That's
Mm.
part of how you rise up. You have to change your thinking, you have to change the way you see it. When you talked about reframing, it's such a game changer.
Yeah, I think
And
reinvention is such a
yeah,
beautiful thing, such a beautiful thing. And so, can you tell me what's and it's always easy to see the movie in reverse, right? When you go through something hard, and so and I just did a just filmed something, and I said I'm making this sound really pretty because I just can't even go back there anymore. I mean, my life is so pretty that, but I want you to know there were so many moments of self-doubt. There were so many moments of all these. I couldn't put one foot in front of the other. I was confused. I was frustrated. It was the messy middle. I hadn't landed yet. It was just so hard. But then when you get on the other side, you're like, oh, it just sounds like all rainbows and butterflies. And it so wasn't. There was no part of it that was. But there's stress can be good. It really can. It forces you to grow, really. And if you give yourself permission to ask yourself and know that you're worthy of, what do I want in this season of life?
yeah,
And what I heard you say about, say, we are, would you say, vow fulfillers?
yeah,
We are vow fulfillers, and to see all them go, oh my gosh, wow! Like there's not a that's the moment right there that I live for in life, right there when I just became their moment, just like you did, and I gave them hope, and everything from that moment on, is going to be different. You
yes,
know that they just gave themselves permission to unleash for the first time. But I have to say that being a pastor's wife and also being a widow, I think that I feel like you are somebody who is so comfortable in your own skin. And that's a rare thing to find in general. I think it's even more rare thing to find in your previous world, your previous identity. And I'd have to think that just your presence and the way that you carry yourself is enough to give these ladies like, oh, I can do that too. Right? Because you're so sure in who you are. And to even have the courage to say, like, I don't know, I'm on this journey too, which I believe is one of the most liberating things as a coach, just to be able to say, I still have coaches. I always will. Like,
yeah,
I can't see the picture frame when I'm the pitcher, but I can tell you what I've learned so far. I can tell you what has worked for me. I feel, and do you feel like that has been helpful to these ladies? Just seeing the way that you walk through life and being around your presence to go, oh gosh, Jillian did it. Okay, I'm going to borrow some of her energy in this
yeah.
community, and I can do that now too.
It's hard because that also becomes a pressure.
Yeah.
Um,
Yep. I get
because you
it.
feel like, what if I do fail? Are they going to feel like they're going to fail? If I don't have
Mhm.
it together, are they going to feel like they can't get it together? And because if you would have seen me at 16, I was the most insecure human on the planet.
Sure.
Um,
Me too.
Being married at 19 to a man who was divorced, to a man who was older than me, put in a ministry where women were not told, we were told not that we couldn't speak on the platform. Um, all these catalytic moments that forced me out of my comfort zone. And on the other side, each time I realize it's really not about me. The insecurity comes when you're like, what are they going to like me? Is it about me? And then I'm realizing this has nothing to do with me. It's about what they need to hear. They need to hear hope. They need to hear life. They need to rise up. And if I don't actually press through my own insecurity, they're not going to hear it from somebody who has the story. And I think part of what you're like, the energy you're getting from me is I fought so hard to get here
Yeah.
and fought mind monsters, fought
Mhm.
critics, fought people that didn't like me. They didn't like what I had to say. And I just can't imagine that. I'm kidding. But I
Me either. Me either.
yeah, and honestly, I also realized that in my own strength, I'm really not that strong, but in my weakness, he's made strong. And it took me a long time to accept that because I felt like I was supposed to be strong, 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 strong.
Mm-mm.
And that day when God said, "I'm trying to get close to you, but you're in the way," he said, "You act like you have it all together and you don't." And he said, "Until you admit your heart's been broken, I can't get close to you because there's a scripture that says he's close to the brokenhearted."
Mm.
And I was like, "Okay, I'm crushed."
Yeah.
And I just went for it. And it was interesting. He said, "I can't meet you where you are until you identify your GPS." He said, I don't know where you are, Jill, because you're acting like you got it together." And he said, "If you'll tell me you're hurt, I'll meet you there. You tell me you're angry, I'll meet you there. If you tell me you're crushed, I'll meet you there. But you won't tell me." And it took me a minute to go, "Oh." And he said, "You are not responsible for my resume." And he said, "I can handle people's criticism. I can handle people's judgment. I can handle people's disappointment." Because I was thinking, well, if I really talk about my pain, I don't want people to think bad of you. He's like, "But I can handle that."
Mm.
And so here I am trying to be strong to protect God. Like, what? Like, oh, okay, yeah, that's my job. And he's like, "I don't need your protection. I don't need you to protect my image. I don't need you to protect my resume. I don't need you to protect. If I get canceled, I get canceled." He's like, "I can handle it." And that right there was such a pivotal intersection of my life because I realized I really am weak and he really is strong.
Yeah.
And if I just surrender my weakness to his strength will come in. And it's hard because I remember someone telling me, you're the glue, you hold this thing together." And I'm thinking, I don't want to be the glue, like I don't
Yeah.
want to be the glue. Somebody else hold it together.
Well, we take those
Um,
identities seriously. We really do.
yeah.
Yeah.
And so ultimately, this journey has brought me to this place of I care what people think in the sense of perception determines reception. How you perceive me will determine how you receive me. Jesus couldn't do a lot of miracles in his hometown because they just saw him as a carpenter. So he could fix their table, but not fix their life. So I do believe we have a responsibility for the perception, but I'm not going to be pressured by what you think of me in the sense of I'm going to please you. It's more like the way I package myself. I want to be approachable. I want to be kind. I want to be generous. I want to love humanity like Christ loved humanity. But it's not about me. It's about you. I want to be approachable so that you can find, hope, and you can find affirmation and encouragement. And if I'm all about myself, and I'm all about what you think about me, I'm going to give a false pretense of who I am. And then we're not going to win here because now I can't give you the hope you need because you won't receive it from me. And
Yeah.
so ultimately, that's the paradigm that I have is I just want to love people. My husband used to say this. He'd say, every person is going through their own private hell. We don't know
True.
what they're going through.
So true.
And he said, we are here to love the hell out of them.
Mm.
And that's what I want to do.
I love that. And at the end of the day, you're a human being. And I love that. I think I was listening to some other things that you were speaking on, but I personally believe that most people are emotionally constipated. And I used to be one of those people
That's
too.
really
And the
good.
fact that you can say that you're angry, you can say that I need to cry right now, you can say I need a moment, I'm having a breakdown right now. It makes you human, and it doesn't mean that like you're not. It's just the moment. It's the moment. And more people can relate to you the more that you can share those things and go, okay, you know what? I can have this moment, but I can still get on stage. I can have this moment, but I can still go to work here in a minute. I can have this moment in my car, but I can go in and do what I need to do in front of my family and my children. But I'm still human. So here's how I handle those moments, right? And let people connect with you through that. I love it.
That's so good.
Yeah.
Very good.
Talk to me about, anyone who's listening and the tactics. Like, again, it's easy to see the movie in reverse, but those early days, and maybe even now when you have moments where if anger creeps back in or may get easier as the time gets on, but like, how did you get through if you could go back to, and I know people were there, but let's say like after the people were there and left your house and you have to keep rising, you have to get out of bed, you have to get through that first holiday, you got to get through whatever it is, fighting the mind monsters, the identity, the pain that you feel thinking that it's your fault. Why has this happened to me? What could I have done? Like, is there certain things that you now know and you instruct these ladies to do? Like, how do you take care of yourself so that you can get through the good moments and those moments that you know are going to be coming?
It's interesting you say that because I do believe, as a believer, there's the supernatural, right? There's the super and the natural. And I think a lot of people lean into the super or they just lean into the natural. And for me, I had to find the balance of both. So the natural would be I got out of bed every day and made my bed because I realized if I make my bed, I won't get back in it. And it was hard because that's what we did every morning together. It was the first thing we would do together. I would open my curtains every day because the vitamin D coming in, it helps replenish your serotonin. So there were physical, natural things that I just did. And I honestly, I don't remember reading about it. I just remember telling myself, make your bed, then you won't get back in it.
Yeah.
And I remember telling myself, go outside. You need sunshine. Just go outside. Walk. Thank God I have dogs,
Mm.
because they have to go outside and walk. And so it put me outside, which really was preventative for me to isolate and cave. There would be days when I just couldn't do it. I mean, I got invited to a wedding and I got all dressed and I had a panic attack because I'm like, who am I going to sit with? Who am I going to do? I can't hear about this. I'm not ready to hear about it. I'm not watching. I can't see them kiss. I can't. So I had to not go, and they were not happy with me.
Mhm.
Um, but I just knew my limits. So that's another thing. You kind of have to know your limits, but you also have to push yourself. And it's a balance beam. It really is a balance beam. The super part was there would be days when I just could not change my thinking. I was so consumed with his absence and just this massive void in my life that I had to put myself in a position to refocus. And for me, I had to turn on worship music to get my focus off myself and onto God. And there would be songs like Firm Foundation, I've Still Got Joy in Chaos, I've Got Peace That Makes No Sense. I'm like, somebody wrote that about your girl. You know what I'm saying? Like, who wrote this song? Because that's my life story. I've got peace that makes no sense. And when I didn't have the peace that made no sense, I would sing about it and then I would have it.
Mm.
And so for me, I remember having a conversation with one of the widowers, and he just talked about his emotions and how hard it was to focus on, get past the emotions of grief and the sorrow and the loss. And I said, here's the thing about your thoughts. You're still in control. You're still the driver. And sometimes it feels like it's getting a getaway car, it's getting away from you. You just have to stop, inhale, breathe, and go, no, I don't have to think like this. And
Yeah.
so there was days when that was so easy. I'd have my cape on. I'd be
Yeah.
flying through the air, Wonder Woman. Then there's days when I'd take that cape, pull it over my head, and almost suffocate myself.
Yeah.
Giving yourself grace for those days, but also calling a lifeline, which was hard because I didn't want to seem needy. I didn't want to seem pathetic. I didn't want to seem that way, but I had relationships in my life that they allowed me to just be me. And we were so close, and they also were mourning the loss of my husband because they were close to him too. And so, I mean, it's a marathon. It is not a sprint. And I wish it was. It'd be so great if it was like, okay, 3 months and you're done. But I will say there will come a point in time, and for me, it was at the 2 year mark that I just realized he's not coming back. He's probably really happy where he is. I'm not going to be miserable where I am. I just not going to do it anymore. And so everything that was haunting the house, the memories, all those things, I reframed it. So now my house, same house, it's a refuge. We had snow last weekend. Some of my kids came and spent the night. We went sledding together. So rather than this be this horrible place that's a reminder of his absence, it became all of a sudden this refuge that reminded us of what we did have.
Mhm.
So a lot of it's up here. It's this work and this work.
Yeah, that's so good. John Gordon says you need to start talking to yourself more rather than listening to yourself. And I'll never forget that. In
Ooh,
those
that's
moments,
good.
that's where I go, right? Like, and that's what you just described right there as you start talking to yourself, telling yourself stop to think a better thought, right? Like
Yeah.
Gordon says that all the time. Okay, well, is there a better one in there? Because this
Try
is
again.
not, that one's not good.
This one's not working.
That one's not good. You talked a lot about service, and I am such a huge believer in service. It's part of my program. I think anytime you're doing, I think in general, the helper's high is real for me. It always has been. It always will be. It's a huge piece of everything that I do. And I instruct people that are, entrepreneurs and building businesses and pivoting and doing all these things to make sure that they're of service every single day. It gets us out of our head. It's all the thing. I'm just saying all of your words. It gets us out of our head. We get to focus on something else. It fills our heart. And I find that so many more answers, like all the answers come back to me. Whatever I was like sitting here going like, okay, let me figure this out, my forehead's all wrinkled. I'm trying so hard. I go be of service. And then all of a sudden I've shifted my mindset. I'm focused on somebody else. I'm letting new energy in. And it's like, poof, the answers somehow just automatically come in. It's amazing how that works. But when you are talking to your widows and widowers, how soon do you think that you can have them start to be of service?
Well, the one lady, it was the very next meeting because
Yeah.
I watched her just encourage and affirm. Um, and I'll tell them, listen, go to the grocery store and just you're going to buy groceries.
Yeah.
Try not to Instacart all the time. Get outside and smile at the cashier and say thank you for being here. Just start with a thank you.
Yeah.
You don't have to go serve the homeless or build a house for humanity. You don't have to do all those things, but honestly, if you can just get them out there once or twice, they're that's all they need because they realize, oh my gosh, this feels so good.
Yeah.
It feels so much better. You just
Yeah.
got to get them out there to do it. And honestly, I would probably do that as soon as I could if I could,
Yeah.
because it gives you a purpose. It gets your eyes off yourself onto somebody else. And then your perspective shifts again and you realize, oh my goodness, I still do have purpose. I can make someone else feel good. I can add value to someone else. I can help make someone else's day. You don't have to have all the money in the world, the education in the world, experience in the world. You literally could go outside wherever you're at and find one person to smile at and just tell them, I appreciate you. And so it doesn't have to be this big, event or this big organized, outreach thing. But that's one of the reasons I feel like church community is so important because a lot of the churches that I'm, a part of, we have outreach opportunities. And so I don't have to come up with it myself. I don't have to organize it myself. I can just play. I mean, listen, my husband died in September and November. My daughter, my granddaughter, and I, we were under the bridge in downtown Nashville serving the homeless because I told my daughter, I said, we got to get out of this house. We got to go serve somebody. And it was weeks later. And we did it all the way through the holidays because it just made me feel so much stronger in my mental capacity, and it made me feel so much better in my serotonin and my dopamine. And I
Hmm.
realized I have to, like, this is life or death for real.
It
Like
really
serving
is.
somebody
Yeah.
else
Yeah.
is for real life or death to me.
Yeah.
And I saw it that way. And I mean, I knew I had to grieve, but grieving, I shouldn't have to choose between grieving and serving.
Yeah. Yeah.
Honestly, that can coexist. I can grieve and serve others at the same time because
Yeah.
you don't have to be perfect. You
Hmm.
don't have to get through your grief. You don't have to have, close that chapter to help somebody else.
What about fun? Can you grieve and serve and can you have fun while you're still grieving?
I think so. That was one of the hardest things,
Yeah.
was to accept that laughter is not betrayal.
Yeah.
And
That's
that
very
was
well
hard.
said.
Yeah,
Very well
that
said.
was
Yeah.
hard. If I'm having a good time without him, is that bad?
Yeah.
Does it mean I don't miss him? No, it means I'm having a good time. The one thing about most people that have passed on, I can't imagine any of them looking back at their loved ones going, please be miserable without me for the rest of your life. Please don't do anything but be a victim. I think that would be great. Most of them want us to live our life. They would want us to. My husband had a close call in 2019. He thought his body was shutting down and he thought he was dying.
Mm.
And he wasn't. He came through. He was fine. But he told one of the guys that he mentors as a musician, he had told him, he said, as soon as I hit the ground, I started praying for Jill's next husband.
Wow.
And I didn't know that. He never told me that. And so my friend, the one that he mentored, said, oh yeah, because you're thinking to yourself, I'm 50 years old. Am I supposed to live the rest of my life alone? What am I supposed to do? And I remember having this conversation, and our friend Zach, he said, "Oh no, Danny would not want you to be alone." And when
Mm.
we did our will, and he looked at me and he's like, "You know, if anything happens to me, I don't want you by yourself." And I said, "Well, if anything happens to me, there's nobody that can replace me." I was just trying to be like, "Good luck." No, I said, "If anything happens to me, I'll have her picked out for you." So, you'll be good.
I will
She will
haunt
adopt you,
you. I will
interrogate
haunt
you,
you
interview.
too forever.
Anyway, no, actually laughter is actually biologically healthy
Yeah.
for us. And yeah, that was a pretty crucial moment when I realized laughter was not betrayal.
Yeah, I think that's another just permission. You're a walking permission slip to so many people that life can still go on, and I can still have fun, and I can reinvent myself. I know that you are very much into personality tests and making sure that your life is aligned to who you are and the things that you love. I know you wrote a book called Wired that helps with all of that. Do you use that as you're encouraging these ladies that you work with when they're reinventing themselves? Do you utilize that book, or do they read that to help to learn about themselves, to go, okay, what do I want in this season? Crazy question, right? Like, it's a crazy, and if you're playing like the supportive role to a spouse, now I get to decide what I want. And I'll tell you, like, again, I don't have that experience, but I have it in the sense of when I left corporate America, and for the first time, it's not the boss's fault, it's not the job, it's what does Kristy want? And I am responsible. Like, I am 100% responsible for everything that happens, good or bad, or me getting closer to my goals. Well, then I sat there with a blank piece of paper for a long freaking time. Like, what do I want? But understanding myself further was very helpful. So can you talk a little bit about Wired and how you utilize that?
So years ago, probably now, it would be about almost 30 years ago, I studied, well, 25 years ago, I studied under a man by the name of Dr. Sandy Culkin, and he's a personality behavioral specialist. And he consults like the Pentagon. He put peace panels together during the wars, and
Mm.
just a very, very strong, consultant in the behavioral world, science world. And so he kind of pulled me along, mentored me, and I started realizing the power of understanding how we're wired, and the power of understanding how our spouse or others are wired. My husband was the exact opposite. And so I like to say opposites attract and then they attack. And so it's like you attract to each other because you see in the other person this amazing strength, right? That you wish you had. Well, then after you're married for so long, it gets on your nerves. And so it's like I was learning about that and realizing, we see difference a lot of times as a liability, when
Mm.
really difference is an asset. If we understand the power of the difference, if we only compare, difference can be a divisive thing. But if we understand and value one another, it can actually be one of the greatest assets in our life. And
Mm.
so what it taught me was I started writing my book called Wired, and it's really strengthening the connection between yourself and you and others by understanding how you're wired. My thing is, I believe we are all wired a certain way. I believe He formed us in our mother's womb the way we are on for our purpose and our life assignment.
Agreed.
And I
A
think life
thousand
has a way
percent.
of bending us out of shape and rewiring us and
Yep.
through all kinds of things. And then we kind of feel lost and we don't know our purpose, we don't know our identity. And so we have to go back to that part of our life where we felt secure, felt happy. And so I did write a book, and it's based on the DISC assessment. And so it just kind of, those are the four quadrants. But what's interesting is I started writing it in 2020, and I finished it just weeks before my husband died. I handed it to my publisher, and it kind of sat in the back burner. And then in 21, I was like, I got to finish this. I can't let this go unfinished. It felt so out of sorts because what am I going to do with this now? Well, then all of a sudden, I started learning people grieve the way they're wired. So the D, who likes to have control, who likes to, be the decision maker, type A person. Oh, hand going up? Anyone? Anyway, um, in grief, they feel that loss of control.
Yeah.
So whatever area of life they feel like they can control, they overcompensate, and they become very, very demanding. The I is the inspirational, they're impulsive, they're the kind, the life of the party, the person that doesn't know a stranger, the chatty Cathy and all that, both extroverts. The I's greatest fear is rejection. So when grief happens, they just are desperate for fun. They just kind of, they cope with humor. The S personality is the stable person, the secure person. Their fear is insecurity and change. And they just want peace from everyone. I just want peace. And then the C type personality is the one that's very calculated, likes data, loves results, love to be correct. So they're the ones that are perfectionism. Typically the D and C are perfectionists. So in grief, they get very critical of life. So I've learned this after I wrote the book about other things. All of a sudden it now translates into grief. But
Well,
what's
wherever you
interesting,
go, you take you with you, right?
yeah, wherever you go, there you are.
Here I am
Um,
again.
it's interesting because with the reinvention part, when you say the word reinvention, a lot of times people think they have to be something completely different.
Agreed. Yep.
And you don't have to be completely different. You just have to let go of things you can't like things are just not going to be the same anymore. It's just not. And so you have to let go of the things that you can't control and embrace the things you can. And our behavior is something we can control, and I wrote the book because I see so many people getting stuck in these profiles and these assessments, which I love every single one of them. The problem is people use them as a crutch, and they're ruled by it. And so my thing is, listen, I want you to understand your behavior, not to be ruled by your behavior, but to control and choose your behavior. I naturally, the I in me is I cope with humor, right? Well, there's some,
I,
yeah,
right?
some of those environments that's not appropriate.
It's
Don't
not.
be quiet, just,
It's not.
don't,
I do the same thing.
it's funny to you,
Yeah, right. Yeah. You're like, don't say this out loud. Please
yeah.
don't say this out loud. Whatever you do, Kristy, do
And
not.
there's moments where you go, I said it out loud, did
I said
yeah.
it out loud.
Did I say that I said it
I'm
out
never
loud.
going to be invited back. Shut
Yeah,
up.
my two sons they cope with humor, and my oldest daughter does not at all. And so, we're making the funeral arrangements, and I'm cutting up with my sons, and my oldest
She's
daughter,
so
she's
offended, right? Yeah.
weeping.
Yeah.
She's so hurt, and
Yeah.
she's offended. And I'm like, yeah, this is not appropriate. So you're learning, you're learning
You
about.
laugh and it's not funny, but I know
I
I
know,
can with you.
I need to just not do this with her in the room. And so it does teach you a lot, and it also helps when you're trying to help the
Others.
widow or the
Yep.
widower find that
Where are
purpose,
they? Yep.
to rediscover that purpose. It's, well, how
Yeah.
are you wired?
Yeah.
What do you think? What's important to you?
Well, for the first time, they're thinking. Some of them, for the first time, they're thinking for themselves. Not who I should I be, as you talked about before. What should I be doing? But who am I, and what do I want right now? I love that. I love that you use that to help them. Speaking of humor, you we have so much in common. I was listening to a podcast, and I literally went like this. When I heard that you're a prankster too, I'm like, oh my gosh, is there like, where are we not alike? What's your favorite prank that you've
Well, it's been a
done so
minute.
far?
It's been a minute since I did this.
Well, you got to find somebody that like
I know you're
can play
inspiring.
along, right?
You're inspiring me to get
Okay,
to get myself
I
back into
can't
that
wait. Get the
mode.
box out. Get
Like,
the
I'm
box
thinking to
out. Let's
myself,
go.
on the next podcast, I'll have a more recent story. Okay, but yeah, one of the guys in my office when we were pastoring, we foiled his whole office. So we had a cafe in our church. And so we took the big, huge commercial grade foil that's like, 6 feet long, like wrapping paper. And we literally foiled his couch. We wrapped his desk. We wrapped his chair. We wrapped his lamp. We wrapped everything on the desk. And I mean, it took forever.
I love
But
that.
he walked in and everything was it's so funny. And then we had someone give us like this, it was like this big, and it was like just the head, like a bust of Jesus, right? And it was burlap, and it was a beautiful piece of art. It was really beautiful. It was made by an underprivileged person that was trying to raise money, and it was just gorgeous. Well, someone actually pranked me by putting it in my chair. So when I came into my office, it looked like somebody was sitting but it was just like this, but they put it on top of a pillow or something. So was it the right size? And I was like,
Yeah,
oh, Jesus. And they're like, yep, that's Jesus.
pretty much. Yep, you're right. Winner,
You win.
winner.
Like,
Yeah, it's always fun until they do it back to us.
yeah,
I s
that's the
I love
part.
that story. Oh, this didn't happen, but over Christmas, so I'm not a TikToker, but somebody posted this TikTok to Instagram. Jillian, I have to send it to you. I laughed and laughed and laughed and then thought, "Who can do this to my brother?" Somebody has got so it was this young driver, and the wife calls and says, "You're not going to believe what your daughter did." And he's like, "Which one?" And she said, "I'm going to put her on the phone." Hands the phone to the daughter, and the daughter says, "Well, I saw this thing on TikTok, Dad, and about the gas stations now have Christmas pumps." And as soon as she got those words out of her mouth, because the diesel pumps are green, as soon I can't even. So, soon as she said that, like, he went, you did not." Oh, and as he's processing this whole thing, at one point he goes, "Well, you need to get off TikTok." So, like, she's I sent it to my niece who's 21. I sent it to my nephew who's 16, who's 17, and I was like, "Okay, no, it'll be more believable with Brock because he's a younger driver, right?" I'm like, "Somebody, you guys have to do this. Please do this when I'm home. I just got to watch the whole thing." Now, my brother's cool as a cucumber. I don't think we would have gotten him. It is so
That's
good
really
though.
funny.
Christmas
It's
pumps.
really fun. Christmas pumps. I have
That's
not heard
that's a good one. You have to remember
mhm.
that for next
We'll
year.
remember to put it actually in my phone alarm for the day after for Black Friday. That's so funny.
Isn't it? I
Yeah,
thought I
that's
thought it was really good. One thing as we wrap up here, I could talk to you all day. I want to be respectful of your time, but I wrote down the word military and put a circle around it because as you know, you're talking about the typical, like, what do you picture in your head when you hear this thing happen? You think of the person who's 85 years old sitting in a rocking chair and knitting, and her husband has passed and he lived a great life. And but I think about all the military spouses that have lost and all the other people like you. And how do we get this word out? I have a good friend who is a death doula. Her name's Suzanne O'Brien. And I mean, she's responsible. Just understanding her life and what she's done. It's part of she's that is part of why I have stepped out as loud as I have, because this whole thing could end tomorrow. I mean, we all know that that's a given. That is a given that we are all not going to be here forever. So she just wrote a book called The Good Death, getting people ready, right? So like what does that look like? Because it's going to happen. And I think about this with you. How do we get the word out? How, where can people find you? How do we get the word out before it's, right when it happens? Or before, or when is the time, right? Like, I want them to be prepared so that they don't have to go through these moments of time where they're figuring it out for themselves.
I'm glad you said that because that sounds like an amazing book. Becoming a widow, there's so many people that aren't prepared. I
Yeah.
wasn't prepared.
Yeah.
And like even with a will, they're not prepared. And it takes so long to go through probate and little checklists like, do you know your husband's passwords? Do you know where your breaker box is? I think for me, I have jillchambers.com as a website. It's kind of anorexic right now. It's got my book Wired available, which is also on Amazon, but it's also got this widow's checklist. I have some blogs that I put in there. I am currently working on a book, Beyond the Loss. I'm trying to put these thoughts together, but really awareness to me it doesn't sound impactful, but for instance, when I went last year, the pastor of Highlands called. He said, "We're going to launch a widows initiative on 25 campuses." So they brought me down to Alabama. We whiteboarded this whole process, this whole thing that we're doing. The biggest thing I said to them was, "Will you just give us a seat at the table?" Because you get up and you speak about if you're married or single in the room, and we're like, we're widowed. When you're thinking about your dinners, when you're thinking about your outreach, when you're thinking about your events, don't forget us. And the thing about becoming a widow is we did a brunch last April and almost 700 widowed people came. And then in September, that was in May. September, we did a women's conference and we had a special, like a breakout luncheon for widows. Well, I had to remind my team that from May to September, there were women there were women that were married in May that became a widow and are now widowed in September. So
Mm-mm.
all your processes have to support that. When you think 2,800 women every day become a widow, So the awareness is a huge key because we only look to the elderly and think, oh, they're probably a widow. You never know. I met a girl this
Mhm.
morning who was 25 when she became a widow. She had just gotten married. So yes, the military, they need support. There's not a lot of support. I mean, even you think about health
Yeah.
insurance, and when the husband passes away, so his health insurance goes away. So now you've got this family who is used to going and getting their teeth cleaned and their eyes checked. They can't because she can't support it. She can't afford it. In
And,
Tennessee,
and and all the energy too that like, how do I figure this out? How do I do
yeah.
this for myself? Right? Like you can't even figure out sometimes how to drive yourself home from wherever you are because you're in shock.
Listen, when I found out Discount Tire, I can pull up, they will check the air in my tires and fill it up for free. You have no idea. I felt like I had won the lottery. And I put that out to every single widow in my world. I'm like,
We
oh
love
my
you,
God.
Discount Tire.
Oh
Thank
yes,
you.
shout out to this
Thank
for
you.
real though.
Seriously.
And
Yeah.
there's other companies and corporations that are kind of slowly coming around, and
Yeah.
I mean, one of the hardest things, Christine, this probably from being divorced, is we feel so vulnerable.
Yeah.
When we have to go buy it, my air conditioner went out
Yeah.
and I had to buy a new air conditioner. And I'm thinking, oh, they're going to take advantage of me because I don't know what questions to ask. I don't know how to go negotiate. So I think this is it's kind of an iceberg. You know what I mean? If you think about it, it's like we're hitting the tip of it. There's a whole bunch of stuff under the water that needs to be dealt with, and it's for me, it's one step at a time, one stage at a time. The community factor is huge because when you're in community, you can reach out to each other. Especially because I have widows and widowers. We got this one guy. He's so funny. He will send us pictures of like he'll be at like TJ Maxx and he'll be like, which one goes together? I don't know which shirts go with which shirt, and I'm like, pick the green, do that. And the next meeting, he wore it. We wore
Aw.
what we helped him pick out. So it's really funny that, those are the things that can shut people down. But when you're in community, it actually becomes fun.
Yeah.
You get to help each other and assist each other. And you know what? I will say this. There's about 4 people in my group that have been dating and they will tell you they are happier than they ever thought they could be.
Did they meet in your group?
No,
No.
none of them are dating each other.
Yeah.
But it's interesting. Several of them are dating, a widower from like some of them other states or whatever. But it's really cool to see this joy on their face. And I mean, I've had so many conversations with them that they're like, I just can't believe I waited so long, or I can't believe this. I can't believe I can be this happy. I can't believe this part of me has been awakened again. I never thought I could be there. And then there's some that are like, I just don't think I can do that. And right now you can't.
Yeah. Yeah.
It's too soon.
Yeah. Yeah.
Um,
But the person who needs to see that happiness and is waiting to give themselves permission needs to see that.
Yeah, and I want to just give anybody listening who's in this season, give yourself permission.
Yeah.
Once you understand who you are and rediscover who you are, put yourself out there. Don't be afraid. There are widow chasers out there. There's scammers out there. That's another reason why community is important. Um, Huge reason why community is important because you can get blindsided by this thought of love and then you don't see it.
Yeah.
So when you bring them into your community, everybody else is like flag, 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 flag. But yeah, I think to answer your question, for right now, what I have available is at jillchambers.com. But
Okay.
I think the more we talk about it,
Yep.
as soon as I opened up on my social media and I started posting about it, I was getting calls from all over the country from people that's like, I have a widow friend. I don't know what to say. I don't know what to do. I don't know how to talk to her. Give me her number. I'll call her. But then I realized I can't do that by myself, and so that's why I have a small group curriculum. It's called Walking with Widows. And my best friend, who my ride or die, she's a divorce. She's not a widow, but she hosts it at her house. Is plug and play because it's me. I'm leading everything on via video and walking through those stages. But what happens through that is that community. You start finding a place where you fit. And so that's the biggest thing, again, that I would reinstate and reinforce is finding community. So if you are a person that has a heart and wants to help people, reach out to me on my website. I can get you the curriculum. I don't sell it. I just give it away because I trust God right now to take care of my needs. And I just want desperately to help people find community and find hope. And they will find healing. If they can find hope in community, they will find healing. It's the natural result of hope and community is healing. you just don't not find it unless you shut yourself out. So it's a beautiful, beautiful thing. And then there's other resources out there. There's other organizations and things, but awareness and account, like we just want to be counted. We just want to
Yeah.
be seen. So thank you for giving me an opportunity to be on your podcast.
Oh, you are so welcome. I'm so appreciative that you're here. And you're right. I mean, it's like with the best of intentions, I wouldn't have thought of that category. I just wouldn't have, right? When you're considered as a business owner, I know Discount Tire does this, but I'm sure so many other companies accidentally, they don't mean it. It's just not on their
I
radar,
didn't. I
right?
mean,
A
I
lot of
didn't. You
lot of
passed me.
tables, yeah, until you're there and then you're like, okay, no.
This is real.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. Thank you so much for being here.
Hey, thanks for letting me.
Of course. Of course. I can't
Let's go
wait
prank
to
someone together.
I know, I know. We can't yeah, okay.
Watch
I
out,
just
Shannon.
I was just gonna say, we can't I don't think that one would go over.
No,
I
it's
don't
not.
think that would
You
go
and I
over.
want to live. We
That
want to
was
live
the first wow,
together.
we are so in sync. I was like, "I'm coming in." No, not that one. No.
Yeah.
Thank
Wow.
you so much. Until next
Thank
time,
you
my
so much,
friend.
Kristy. Have a wonderful time. Thanks so much again.
You're welcome.